They've been a staple in the ranks of the Space Wolves armies, but how viable is the Grey Hunter's datasheet and points cost in Warhammer 40,000 10th edition? In this video, we'll take a look at who they actually are in the lore, how they factor on the tabletop with reference to datasheets, abilities, leadership options, and army synergy, and what to consider before spending your precious points on them, either in competitive or casual play. Welcome to my mini Grimdark. Those that survive long enough as blood claws will eventually rein in their ferocity and recklessness to join the ranks of Grey Hunters. Though they're no less aggressive in nature, the Grey Hunters have at this stage learned to control their base instincts and follow the strategic direction of their pack leaders. Grey Hunters have begun to show the physical manifestations of the Canis Helix, growing long fangs, developing leathery skin and greying hair, whilst their appearance might be viewed as genetic deviance to outsiders and other Codex compliance chapters of Space Marines. To Space Wolves, these mutations are seen as a sign of maturity and that the warrior is coming into their prime. Swearing unbreakable oaths to their pack brothers, the Grey Hunters form close bonds, standing side by side even in the face of overwhelming odds. Units of Grey Hunters are perfectly capable of operating independently for prolonged periods of time, holding the line with their bolt carbines until the enemy breaches their defense, at which point they wield their chainswords with all the ferocity of a blood-claw brother. Looking at the Grey Hunter's datasheet, and for comparison, we'll also take a look at standard intercessor datasheets and abilities, since both units are fulfilling similar utility roles on the tabletop in most detachments. And in most detachments, both will be viable options for your list. Starting with a pretty standard datasheet for Grey Hunters in general, with the extra speed you'd expect from Space Wolves. Movement 7, Toughness 4, Save 3, plus 2 wounds, 6 plus leadership. Setting them apart a little from intercessors, Grey Hunters have a pretty impressive OC3 per model. For the main pack, the unit are armed with bolt carbines for range and Astartes chainswords for melee. At range, their bolt carbines are pretty good for peppering enemy light infantry with 24-inch range, 2 attacks hitting on 3+, strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. They have the rapid fire 1 trait, so at 12 inches they have 3 attacks. The chainswords come in with 4 attacks in melee, hitting on 3+, strength 4, -1 AP, and 1 damage. The pack leader can take a plasma pistol instead of a bolt carbine with extra strength, AP, and damage potential at the expense of range and risk of hazardous, should you choose to overcharge it. Let's be honest with ourselves, you're gonna overcharge it. The pack leader can also arm themselves with either a power fist or power weapon instead of a chainsword. The power weapon is strength 5 and AP -2 compared to the chainsword. The power fist is 1 fewer attacks, but with strength 8, AP -2 and damage 2. I like the power fist, since the unit in general has plenty of capability for tearing up chaff, so this will give them a little more capability to punch up, but I don't think the choice is impactful in most games, and the power axe looks really good on the sculpt, in my humble opinion. Highlighting the most impactful differences with their intercessor counterparts, and the bolt carbine that the Grey Hunters carry is just a bit weaker than the bolt rifle. The bolt carbine basically gets rapid fire 1 at the expense of assault for advance and shoot, heavy for a +1 to hit when stationary, and -1 AP. That's not an equal trade, and if there was a choice, I'd definitely take the bolt rifle. Grey Hunters also don't have the option for taking a grenade launcher in the unit. Intercessors take the first point for ranged output. In melee, the Astartes chainswords give the Grey Hunters an extra attack each and -1 AP compared to the Intercessors' close combat weapons. Whilst the pack leader can't take a Thunderhammer and miss out on devastating wound, the extra attack hitting on a 3+ rather than a 4+ for the power fist isn't a poor substitute at all. Grey Hunters take it for melee. So what about the abilities, and how do they change the score? Grey Hunters just have a single native ability which gives them a rerolls of wound roll 1 and full rerolls for wound rolls when the target of their attacks is on an objective. This applies to both melee and shooting. This is flat out a great buff. They'll likely hit with enough attacks at range or in melee to make the ability relevant in each turn, as long as you're able to target the right enemies. Remember, no AP on those bolt carbines. They're just going to bounce off Terminator armor most of the time, whether you get those wound rerolls through or not. By comparison, intercessors have 2 native abilities. They have sticky objectives for utility, and when they target the same unit, their bolt rifles get 2 extra attacks. 2 extra attacks makes their ability to clean up light infantry units pretty impressive, and in practice, it's more impactful than the rapid-fire trait that Grey Hunters have. Without spending time doing probability math, which I'm not particularly good at, to be honest, these abilities are well matched, all in all. Strictly speaking, then, Grey Hunters are pretty level with their standard Astartes cousins, maybe a touch better with the extra movement and extra 1OC. Then we come to unit composition and points, and unfortunately this is where things will start to unravel for the Grey Hunters a little bit in competitive play. Just to emphasise this is from a meta standpoint, and I do have different views of Grey Hunters in more casual settings, which we'll come to in a moment. But the first noticeable challenge for the Space Wolves as unit is that they are 180 points for 10, where Intercessors are 160 points for the same size unit. I guess you could argue that OC3 Movement 7 is worth 2 points per model, but those datasheet enhancements are only going to benefit the Marines situationally. Having the option to move 7-inch is great on paper, but across a 5-round game, it's the difference between 35 inches of mobility and 30 inches of mobility, and ultimately, this isn't going to make much difference to the outcome of the battle, the vast majority of the time. An OC3 in theory is great, but again, purely considering competitive play at this stage, that 20 points for something that's only going to matter situationally could go towards something that can be guaranteed to be impactful. I guess I'm saying that these are nice to haves, that more often than not wouldn't be missed if they'd never been there at all. Meta-optimized lists generally don't take those nice to haves, they prioritize points on things that'll guarantee return as much as possible. The next competitive play sticking point for Grey Hunters is in their unit composition. Currently, you can field Intercessors in units of 5 or 10. A unit of 5 Intercessors for just 60 points is a truly great utility unit. Objectives secured means they can start on your home field objective and move off it, keeping it under your control until the opponent can get someone into your backfield to take it. This is even bigger in practice than it sounds, because a unit of Intercessors might be perfect for scoring some of your more mundane secondaries too. They could be scoring your home objective for at least a couple of turns and going off and scoring secondaries, whilst the core of your army focuses on the enemy. That's amazing value. Also, this small unit can still output 4 bolt rifle shots each with their target elimination ability. If you arm the sergeant with a bolt rifle as well, that's 20 ranged attacks. That's equal ranged output to the Grey Hunter's 10-man unit outside of 12 inches, at less than half the points. It's a really good value unit. And by the way, there are other similar units in Codex Space Marines that I could have used for this video in place of the humble Intercessors. Space Marines have some very meta-friendly, efficient small utility units. For Grey Hunters, this optimization just isn't available. They can only be taken in units of 10, and at 180 points, that's a tough pill to swallow on a competitive scene. Without sticky objectives outside of a stratagem, they don't have the utility of Intercessors. It's not that they're bad at all. In fact, Grey Hunters are a good unit, going to great with the right leader choice and in Space Wolves specific detachments from Codex Supplement Space Wolves. They just don't bring enough of any one thing for them to be a serious consideration in an optimized competitive list at this time when compared to Intercessors, Infiltrators, or some of the other options within the Codex Space Marines. In casual play, I really like this unit. Although everything I've said absolutely applies, if I'm playing a stranger for the first time, or a game of Warhammer 40,000 with some pretzels and a nice glass of Lagavulin, this unit is perfect for a few reasons. Firstly, you can take them and play them however you want against most opponents. Bloodclaws and Headtakers are very specifically driven to a single-minded approach on the battlefield. Get to the enemy and tear them up in melee until someone runs out of friends. I'm okay with this, but I also find it satisfying to have some strategic units in the army to try and push my opponent to score and play the game. Also, in casual play, especially where forces are less optimized, armies like Custodes are a real challenge for Space Wolves because their data sheets are so elite, so Bloodclaws and Headtakers can't outclass their foe on a strength of their assault alone. Grey Hunters are a flexible unit with excellent OC. They can play a more strategic game. They give you another strategy for scoring around your opponent's units rather than having to try and fight your way through them every turn. When we look at leadership and detachment synergies, you'll also see that they love the buffs that Codex Supplement Space Wolves brings them through leadership and detachments, most of which will not be accessible for Codex Space Marines units like Intercessors. So if you want to play a unit that can multitask and get the full wolf glow up on the tabletop, Grey Hunters are much more thematic and much more fun than Intercessors. Secondly, the unit is good without being oppressive at all. This is important in casual gaming to keep things fun. It's possible to buff them to do impressive things in certain situations, as we'll see, but that'll come with some trade-offs. Grey Hunters can leave their mark on the tabletop in the right situations, and you'll look at them with pride when they achieve something unexpected for you to score those decisive round 5 points. That said, your opponent could decide to bully them with an elite unit, or to focus them on them in a round of shooting, and they could take care of your Grey Hunters pretty quickly if they wanted to. Bigger battle line unit compositions has been quietly emerging for some later Codex releases in 10th edition for a few armies, although this isn't necessarily a pattern for all. I play World Eaters too, and Berserkers can't be taken in units smaller than 10 now. A small part of me wonders if Games Workshop are feeling this out, and if we'll start to see more units restricted to 10-man like this in 11th edition, with smaller compositions being restricted to elites like Blade Guard and specialists like Infiltrators. This is pure speculation, with no real foundation other than my own idle thoughts, so take it with a large pinch of salt. Regardless, if Games Workshop do decide to balance Grey Hunters, it's unlikely to be through changes to their unit composition, most likely a points drop. For me, I think this will be welcome for casual play, but I still don't necessarily see them hitting the tournament scene hard, unless players start playing one of the Space Wolves detachments that doesn't necessarily synergize with all of Codex Space Marines units. Let's push standard Space Marines off the stage for now and focus on Grey Hunters again. They have some really good leadership options available to them, with 3 Space Wolves characters and 2 epic heroes. 2 of those characters are brilliant for them, and both of the epic heroes are interesting choices. I've recorded separate videos for most of these leaders already, so check those out for a more in-depth take. Starting with the unlikely one in the Iron Priest. Realistically, your Iron Priest gets lone operative from being within 3 inches of a vehicle, so doesn't really need a bodyguard unit if he's doing his job, and he brings nothing to the Grey Hunters in terms of buffing. I just wouldn't bother with this one. So next we have the Wolf Priest. His native +1 to wound combines with Grey Hunters' wounds rerolls really well, giving them a much higher chance of getting their mass chainsword attacks through. Just remember, it's a melee buff only from the Wolf Priest, so your bolt carbines aren't getting any stronger. The Wolf Priest's healing bombs means he can pick up a destroyed model from the unit he's leading each turn. This could be impactful at times, adding OC3 back to the unit whilst hanging on to an objective, for instance. Grey Hunters aren't any more durable than your typical Space Marines unit though, so the unit might just get wiped out before he gets a chance to activate the ability. Wolf Priest is 70 points, and if you see your Grey Hunters getting in on the action with their chainswords, he's a solid pick for the unit. The final standard character choice is also my favourite in the Wolfguard Battle Leader. You can arm him with a Mastercrafted Bolt Carbine, a strong melee weapon, and then you've got the utility that the rest of the Grey Hunters unit brings. His abilities are a 2+ fight on death for him, which is obviously great, and it gives the unit sustains 1 on all weapons. This is perfect for Grey Hunters, both for their bolt carbines and for their chainswords. They put out enough attacks to fish for those 6s and get the extra hits. On top of this, if the target enemy is within 6 inches, the unit gets to reroll 1s to hit. Not to mention, he benefits from the rerolls of 1 to wound that the Grey Hunters will give him in return. The battle leader really complements Grey Hunters well, and he's a smart choice in all forms of play, for just 65 points. First for the epic heroes that can lead the Grey Hunters is Ulrich the Slayer. He comes with a strong individual profile both at short range and in melee, particularly when he's fighting characters, monsters and vehicles with his abilities and anti-traits. In terms of unit buffs, he gives the Grey Hunters +1 to hit as standard. Don't underestimate this, they put out a lot of attacks and hitting on 2s will increase their output both at range and in combat. Additionally, Ulrich can take a Slayer's Oath at the start of the battle and choose either characters, monsters or vehicles. Part of this benefit will infer a +1 to wound for him and his unit when attacking that foe. This is again great on paper. The problem is Grey Hunters don't have much AP on their attack, so whilst this is increasing their output, tougher foes are still going to shrug it off most of the time. I like Ulrich for the Grey Hunters, I just prefer some of the other options here personally. Finally, Jarl Stormcaller is back in power armor for 10th edition and as such can lead Grey Hunters. I've recorded a whole video on Jarl, so check that out for more details as I do spend a bit of time talking about my argument for him in Grey Hunters, but the summary is that if you're taking Jarl, you'll probably want to pop him into a unit of Grey Hunters. Aside from the fact that he has a genuine ranged profile, as well as a melee profile to complement their utility, he also gives the Grey Hunters an automatic 6-inch advance and adds assault to their ranged weapons. In practice, this means Grey Hunters with Njal leading them can move 13 inches and still fire their bolt carbines. I've used this to good effect, winging around terrain to get line of sight on enemy objective holders or infiltrators. Combined with an advance and charge stratagem can make your Grey Hunters unit a surprisingly effective shock assault unit with Njal Stormcaller in leadership. Of all the options, the Wolfguard Battle Leader is my favourite, with Njal and the standard Wolf Priest coming in behind. The Battle Leader's profile, along with his buffs and low points cost, combine to make him an excellent leader for all of the Space Wolves units he can lead, Grey Hunters included. Njal gives Grey Hunters a defined role, something they're perhaps lacking a little otherwise, with the ability to move quickly into new positions and pepper the enemy, but their combined points cost is a little bit too much to stomach for competitive play for me. Loads of fun in casual games though. Looking at the detachments, it's worth remembering that the +1 to hit and potential +1 to wound are melee-specific buffs in Saga of the Hunter, so whilst they're still great for Grey Hunters in close combat, they don't do anything for the bolt carbines. Territorial advantage is perfect for your Grey Hunters. It's a CP, but it allows them to move off an objective that they hold and retain it until the opponent takes the objective for themselves. This is particularly useful if you have Njal in the unit leading them, allowing them to grab objectives and remain mobile. Chosen Prey allows you to fall back and then still shoot and charge, great for Grey Hunters that can basically do both. Drop out of engagement, weaken your enemy with those bolt carbines, then charge back in with a ton of chainsword attacks. 1 CP for Chosen Prey. In Saga of the Bold, you'll need a leader for your Grey Hunters unit to benefit from buffs and stratagems fully. The single dice rerolls it gives are going to be useful enough for Grey Hunters. You've then got the options of lethal hits on their melee weapons for a CP from Inspiring Presence. I do quite like Champion's Guidance too, particularly if your unit's shooting at an enemy unit on objective. It gives them full rerolls on their hits for 1 CP. If I've got Njal leading a Grey Hunters unit, I have Alpha Strike written on the back of my hand to remember it for 1 CP to get advance and charge. Move 13 inches, shoot the enemy unit to weaken them, charge in with chainswords to try and finish them off. Countercharge is 2 CP, it's pricey, but situationally very strong, allows you to countercharge. It's a great way to drop your Grey Hunters unit onto a foe that's trying to take a midfield objective late in the game. They won't get any charge bonus, so think of this as a bit of a Hail Mary. Saga of the Beastslayer grants Grey Hunters lethal hits against characters, monsters, and vehicles in the first instance, then everything once the saga is completed. It's a solid buff and it'll complement the number of attacks that they output both at range and in melee. +1 to wound from Unbridled's Ferocity is great for helping Grey Hunters punch up against tougher foes in melee. After that, both Pinning Fire and Thunderous Pursuit are interesting. Pinning Fire reduces the move and charge characteristic of an enemy unit hit by your unit's ranged fire. With 24-inch range, a Grey Hunters unit could pin a would-be threat to one of your units from distance. Situationally, this could be impactful. Thunderous Pursuit gives you Grey Hunters an automatic 6-inch reactive move if the opponent comes within 9. Perfect for them to reposition around an objective, particularly if the enemy unit had planned to charge the Grey Hunters to contest it. All of these are 1 CP. As I said at the start, the Grey Hunters will struggle to compete with the utility and flexibility of the several standard Astartes units in competitive play. I don't think they're unplayable, they just aren't optimal. And top table players will generally look to squeeze every drop of return out of every point they spend on their army. I don't think a points drop will suffice to solve this, although I do hope to be proven wrong, as I think Grey Hunters are a thematic staple in Space Wolves armies, and I'd love to see them in top lists. Casually, they're really fun to put on the tabletop. They do a bit of everything, even if they aren't necessarily specialised in anything. I ran a really different list against Sisters of Battle quite recently with 2 Grey Hunters units, one led by Njal and the other by a battle leader. I definitely wouldn't invest this much of my force in Grey Hunters on a typical Tuesday, but I fancied a change, and it was a lot of fun. Njal's unit felt like it was everywhere, and the battle leader's unit had some pretty nasty output in melee with his hammer, along with all of those sustained hits and wound rerolls. Whilst my Bloodclaws and Wolfen units wrapped up the opposition and took the Sisters by storm in melee, Aryak and a blob of Terminators soaked up much more than their share of damage. Njal and his unit of Grey Hunters were free to win me the game through completing some vital secondaries late on. I still think they're generally an overpriced unit, but I really enjoy playing them. If this video has been useful, please like and subscribe to show your support for this new channel. If you've got your own takes on Grey Hunters, share them in the comments, particularly if you've got some lore points I didn't cover or some in-game considerations others might benefit from. Thanks for watching, keep hobbying.